And I love
Yeah.
interaction.
In this episode of the Success Grid podcast, I am speaking with Mitch Carson on how to get on TV and get covered in the media internationally and the best ways to get and be distinctive in your market. So Mitch is a professional speaker and closer who have spoken on stages in 63 countries and produced over 2,000 live events in 19 countries. Been a home shopping network pitchman who knows how to sell anything and craft a unique message around any product, person, or event. He mentored CEOs, speakers, authors, consultants, and coaches with the purpose of sharing their message and business objectives on an international level. Some of them are like Mark Victor Hansen, Dan Kennedy, and Sir Richard Branson. He have been with him on stage and others, many others. And we are going to be talking about this very important topic for businesses and how it's influenced the growth of a business, which is something that I would believe it's very important for us to have bigger businesses and bigger brands and personal brands mainly. So, Mitch, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me today. I'm
Awesome,
excited to be here.
awesome to have you. So, first of all, Mitch, because this is the Success Secret podcast and you've been in many countries, you traveled, I would say, to more than 60 countries. You've been into events, you've been in TV, multiple shows, and you met a lot of people. So, how would you define success yourself, and how do you see other people have certain misconceptions of what success is?
Well, success is such a wide-ranging definition. Some would define it as money, how much money you have accumulated, how much money you're earning currently. Some would define it as, do you have a successful family, meaning a well-balanced family? Are you connected to your spiritual life, meaning your religion or some other form of spiritual connection or not? And it might include your health as successful. All of those are ways of defining, and then there might be more, but those are probably some of the most commonly discussed determinants of success out there in the marketplace and in the in our lives. You're in a different part of the world than I'm in. You're in Jordan, I'm in America. I don't think it's going to vary much from those definitions. There might be greater emphasis on some aspects in your country versus mine, and also based on the individual. And I think that we have to set our own benchmarks for success. What does that mean? Set a plan, execute on the plan, measure what your results are. And sometimes outcomes don't necessarily go according to plan. And that's life. I would just say that's a metaphor for life, Hussein, is it's sometimes we have, I'll use a baseball metaphor. It's a game that we play here in the States. It's our national pastime. And we get thrown what is called a curveball, where the ball is coming at us in a specific direction. You swing the bat and you don't connect with the baseball because it curved out of your way. It was an unexpected splash of a wave if you're on a boat, and that might capsize you. It might throw you in a different direction. And I think the resilient people are the ones that adjust to these unexpected waves, the unexpected weather circumstances that we have no control over. We all know about Mother Nature. And Mother Nature gives us wind, earthquakes, tornadoes, tsunamis, what have you. All of that we have to adjust to. And life is not a straight line. It never has been, never will be.
Definitely, definitely. I love that. You mentioned Curveball. I think there is a movie by Clint Eastwood which is called Curveball.
Yeah. Well, it's the unexpected change in the pattern.
Yeah,
It's,
definitely.
we have a plan. We may chart a course in life. We may chart a course in our marketing plan. We may
Yeah.
chart a course. Well, I'm going to ask and get your input on this. You're a prolific podcaster. I've listened that you're in the top 4% of Spotify, I think it was, one of those categories. You told me about in your category, in terms of content, you're a prolific content producer. If you were to go back in time from when you started this, I don't know how many years ago you started your podcast, you probably had a plan in place, but you had to change the course of your podcast path many times along this years of a journey that you're on to where you are today. And anticipating in a year from now, you might adjust a little bit. You might have to adjust the steering wheel on that yacht that you're captaining because things happen. Political, geographic, things happen in life, or improvements. Oh, this steers better. And I think that's the mark of a good entrepreneur, a good business person, a good manager, is things happen, curveballs happen, adverse weather happens. How do we adjust and get back on track, on course, on course?
So now, speaking of that, like, do you think there's a differentiation between the social media, being on social media, and being on the main TV and this mainstream of media? And do you think that every, let's say, business or entrepreneur as a personal brand, if we're talking about that, must be on this type of channels that are TV maybe or big media? Do you
I
think
think
that's important?
initially, that's a great question I get asked a lot. And I'll answer it with my best attempt at being unbiased. I come from big media. My background was television, newspapers, magazines, radio shows. Today, the lines have become blurred. I think if you are a comprehensive, full-blown, excellent marketer and authority building person, if you have a following, you're an expert, and then you want to be an authority and an influencer as you ascend the ladder of success, you have to be good at all of it. And with regard to social media, it depends on the category you're in. What is your demographic profile, and what's the demographic profile of your audience? So an astute, switched on marketer understands this, and it's always going to, way after we're gone and we're in the dirt and we're in the heavens, Hussein, it's going to be the same. It's message to market match, my friend. Message to market. If our message today hits your audience, awesome. We've done our job. But if we start talking about geopolitics in the Middle East, that's not the appropriate topic. So we need to speak to business, to what your topic is about, and stay in our lane. And it's understanding this. So if we're talking to people that are 50 plus in age, I'm going to say television still holds a great deal of credibility. Radio still holds a great deal of credibility. And if you can get in any type of print publications, grab it before there isn't anymore. Because that's what's called legacy value. That's something that will be there for your kids, generations after you. You can put it on the wall, and it has credibility and legacy value. And in my generation, I've been in multiple publications, print publications, multiple TV channels. Now I'm embracing more podcasts such as this. That's why I've expanded. I've realized, okay, it's not just network television. I'm a TV show host on NBC here in Las Vegas, where I'm calling from. So I'm naturally biased for network television. It has a much, much higher credibility level because of the branding association to big media that's nationwide and in some cases worldwide. Like I had a show on CNN Philippines when I was there. That has huge credibility, much more than Joe Blow's podcast that has 20 episodes. I'm sorry. There are billions of dollars behind building that kind of a brand versus, and this is no disrespect to podcasts. It's a new platform. Who knows where they'll be in 10 years? They might be at parity. There might be a gap, but as it stands today, 2024, when we're doing this interview, network television, network radio shows still garner much, much greater brand recognition and prestige than your typical podcaster and or YouTube channel. And of course, there are exceptions. People that have got more than 100 shows, such as yourself, those are credible, real podcasters. You're niched, but there are riches and niches. And when you have somebody that does their first podcast and thinks that they're a great host, Smell the coffee, Buster. You aren't necessarily. You got to learn the ropes. When I started out as a journalist, I had to learn the ropes. We have to cut our teeth on this. I studied journalism in college quite a few years ago. I thought I was good until I realized I wasn't. Had to practice, had to do it. And there's something you got to put in the dues. Are you the same guy today that you were when you started your podcast?
Well, of course, you improve every day as much as you can. This is the
Yes.
this is the purpose of things. Yeah, like you improve. So now, so what are the best things or strategies or like the steps for someone like you mentioned now podcast? We don't know what it could be like in years, but major media stills there because it's been established for years and years, and there is a lot of things that supports it. So, what
Yes.
are the best, let's say, strategies or steps for someone maybe looking to get more exposure?
I would say if you have not been on television yet, go ahead and start with getting on podcasts to guests to get that muscle flexed. Go to the gym and do the curls. Do the curls by podcast guesting to begin. You and I started talking before we hit record about being a host. I'm going to venture into being a podcast host later. And once I've learned a lot more, and I don't take anything for granted because I've got years of journalism experience, and I was a live television pitchman on a channel called Home Shopping Network in the 90s. Those are different platforms, and I would be arrogant to think, because I've got all that background, that I am going to be excellent on podcasts, both as a guest and as a host. Do I have an unfair advantage over the person that's brand new? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to be one of your better guests simply because of my background. Am I going to be the best? No. There are plenty of guests that'll probably be better than me because they've done it more times. But someone that's starting out brand spanking new, has never been interviewed, my suggestion, get interviewed on either live casts, podcasts, smaller ones, then to start to graduate a little higher, create a one sheet, proof that you've been around and have been on some of these things, because I think one of the reasons I earned a spot on your platform, and thank you for this, is because you looked into my background. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Well, and if I had never been on anything, you have to be careful because you are an established podcaster at this point. You've got I don't know how many interviews. I mean, they're well over 400, was it? Or something outrageous, 1,000, something. It was a huge number. And that shows that you are a steady, reliable podcaster, podcast host that's in this for the long haul. You've got longevity, and longevity proves stability. And you have a brand to protect, because if you bring me on one week and next week you bring on somebody of great magnitude or low magnitude who's never been on a podcast, that's going to hurt your brand. Similarly, when I bring people onto television shows here in Las Vegas, and that's what I do professionally, work as a publicist for authors and speakers and CEOs, they have to be trained. I don't let anybody go on TV cold. They must go through my media course. They must get practice sessions with me in advance, both over Zoom and then in person before we get on TV, because you cannot retake. It's live. My reputation is at stake. I cannot fail with anyone. I could lose my business and right to be there. So I think there's a higher expectation. And for the newer people who are listening to this, who haven't guested, have just been listening to your podcast, great. You want to take the next step and become a guest and or host like you, Hussein? They got to pay their dues, man. Go with some of the smaller podcasts in the beginning and start graduating. Get comfortable in front of a microphone. Get comfortable talking and answering questions comprehensively, and then listen to yourself when you get the MP3 and or MP4 files. You'll see how you come across. Did you have lettuce in your teeth? I mean, do you sound right? All of these things matter. And self-evaluation is the best feedback you can get. More so than if you coach somebody. If I coach myself after this call, I'm going to be harder on me than you could ever be, Hussein, and you look too kind anyway.
Yeah.
But that's my read on it,
Yeah,
buddy.
so you mentioned the media kit. So do you think every speaker or guest should create some kind of a one pager for themselves to have certain things or topic they cover? That's important, right? Because people will have a quick look at it and know if it's a good fit. That's very important, right?
1000%. And some of the elements I look at, and I create this for clients because I want them to use as a springboard what they've done here to get on more podcasts, more media appearances, starts with a very good headshot.
Mm.
And you cannot not have one particular photo. You must smile. If you don't smile, I'm going to think you don't have teeth. And if you don't have teeth, I'm going to think you're very hungry because you can't chew your beef. Okay? You got to have teeth. You got to show those teeth because a smile is worth 1,000 words. And you have to the other thing that is important is to allow a little bit. These are subtle hints that I share in my trainings to people. My picture that I sent you, I paid a lot of money for a professional photographer to take that. She positioned me in ways that she moved me around like I was a doll. I mean, subtle changes with the chin and doing the slight exposure with the head a little bit off to the side, not straight at the camera like you look like you're a raging bull with train smoke coming out of your nose. Not good, not friendly. And if you have a frown, it's not going to get booked. We're all human beings at the end of the day. Use your given talents, your innate talents to show the kind side to you. Your kindness. We're humans. I can't stress this point enough. And slightly have your neck exposed. This shows vulnerability, not weakness. You're looking to get booked, not eaten. It's not like a lion's going to come and grab your neck. We're here to get interviewed by Hussein and other podcast hosts like that. And show a great smile, show your face, have good lighting, hence a great headshot. It's a branding photograph. When you then upload this interview that we do, I'm going to look good on not only here, I took the time to do this, but the one sheet has to show a great, that's the first thing people look at is the headshot. The very first thing. Then they're going to look at the testimonials. It's much like a book, the cover of a book and the back. People look at the front of the book and then they flip it over and look who's endorsed this person. I load testimonials on my podcast one sheet. I don't have a lengthy bio. It's not important. They're not there to learn for me to brag about me. That comes later. What are my topics where I can benefit their crowd? So I have 3 topics that I talk about on my one sheet. I have 3 testimonials from 3 different people. I have 2 well-known multi-book authors, and I have a female author who's of a different race than the 2 men. So I make sure I balance the 2, and I'm going to get in trouble with these pronouns. But she is a chromosomed female, and I have 2 males in there. And I did that strategically, as well as I put all of my social handles there. That gives them easy access to look at me because we're all subject to what we expose on social media today.
Definitely.
100%. And the most important, if you are a speaker, author, coach, or consultant, is your LinkedIn profile. It also must match. Your brand needs to be congruent and consistent. If you have a great headshot on your LinkedIn profile, have one on your one sheet. Alternatively, if your one sheet is professionally done, for you to have a picture of you thumbing your nose and doing a pig face on your LinkedIn profile, we've got an issue. Okay, do that on TikTok or Instagram if you want to be funny and comical.
I don't think that should be anywhere.
I know, I agree. I'm just.
I don't think that should be anywhere. But anyways, yeah, that's very. We have to distinguish ourselves in every way. So throughout
Yes.
business and career, what was the worst advice and what was the best advice that you have received?
The worst advice. Oh my gosh. That had to be, oh boy, it's a little bit personal, but it was from my father, who I did not have a great relationship with. And I didn't meet him until I was 18 years old. And when I was 20, he dispensed the worst advice I ever had. But if I were to look back and turn the clock back in time, it was probably the best advice I could have ever received in order to push me to do what I'm doing. I was going through college, which you might call university back then, and I had been working in a supermarket as a frozen foods clerk. So I would stock the shelves with ice cream and all the frozen foods. And my father knew that that I was working there. And one of the things he said to me, and I was studying journalism in school and communication, learning about how to communicate better. And I was pretty introverted and shy at that point. Didn't talk so much. And now I'm a very different person. But he said to me then, you have a very bad personality. People don't like you. And you should stay in the freezer and work in the freezer for the rest of your life. And that's what my father told me. So that was the worst advice. So if I listened to him, we wouldn't be on this podcast today, Hussein, and I'd still be in a freezer, and you'd probably have to find me in the ice cream section, and it would be Chocolate Mitch. Okay? Yeah, so that was the worst advice is, you've heard the saying, we all have, and this happens in every culture all around the world, every religion. There's some people that'll try to beat you down. You have to listen to your inner voice and realize what's possible for you and go for it. Go for it. Do it because you believe it's possible, because what the mind perceives, it can achieve. You first have to dream it, set out a plan, act on it. So had I listened to him, I would have failed miserably. Now, to answer part B of your question, what was the best advice I ever got was from a mentor of mine named Dan Kennedy, who I had become a pretty successful businessman and owned an advertising agency. And I was already, by my definition, successful. Some people would say, well, that's not success. If you're numbering a scorecard in terms of dollars earned, I had done well compared to where I had come from, relative to where I came from. When I came out of the freezer and started to get into other lines of work, I was successful. And then I signed up and I realized I want more in life. I want to achieve more. And I know that speaking is the route. So I started to speak more. And Dan said, if you really want to become successful, the necessary next step is you must author a book. You must write a book. Because if you are truly going to own the category of business that you're involved in, a book is a necessary credential. And my life changed dramatically. Here's what happened. Here's what happened, Hussein. I'm going to startle you, and then I'm going to make you cause your mouth to open up wide. I went from earning a big income, for me, within a year after publishing my first book, to increase my income 16-fold. And I'll tell you why. I changed the matter between this year and this year in believing how I saw myself. It had everything to do with self-perception. Because I believed I deserved. That's the phrase. I believed I deserved, Hussein. And it didn't have anything to do, maybe it was my father with the negative statement that he made years before that. I've never forgotten that. It was a negative motivator. I'll show you. He's long since passed. But I made more money in a year than he made in his entire life, in one particular year.
Awesome.
And he just, So if I listened to that bad advice, I'd be stuck where I was. Instead, I took a risk, listened to somebody who had achieved a level of success, listen and get the advice from people who are at or very near to where you want to go, or you want to exceed that person.
Definitely.
Because
That's very
important. Oh, I'm sure you get that in your part of it's no different. It's human nature.
Yeah, we always have to look up, not down. Like that's very
correct.
So Mitch, where can people learn more about you and get in touch with you when they learn more about what we're talking here about, how to get bigger media, how to be in bigger shows, and how to be more, let's say, unique in your perspective into what media is and where should you be for having better personal brand and bigger business.
Okay, well, I guess you can leave it in the show notes too out there. But for me, if they would like to have, since they're your guests, if they've listened to this, I will offer a complimentary media evaluation so we can map out a success route. It costs you nothing, but my hourly rate is quite high. So I'll just say that this is a gift as a way of thank you. They can go to getinterviewedguaranteed.com/meet with Mitch. Getinterviewedguaranteed.com/meet with Mitch. And that's where they can sit, schedule a time with me where we can sit for 1/2 hour and discuss or just say hi. And that will be a way for me to measure whether my message resonated and connected with them, Hussein.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you very much, Mitch, for being with me on this episode. Great insights and value and knowledge bombs. I would say that you've been doing this for a long time and you know the smallest of the smallest details of this, and you are very established. So thank you for being with me on this episode.
Thank you very much for having me.